5/8 today. Spectrum Business, made to work.
Got some soup for you.
You are loved. You are valued. You are resilient. You got this.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides at aarp.org/caregiving.
Good evening, I'm Errol Lewis, and you are watching Spectrum News special coverage of the Democratic National Convention. It's 8 p.m. on the East Coast, 5 on the West Coast, and 7 p.m. in Chicago, where tonight the final night of the convention is underway at the United Center. All eyes, of course, are on Vice President Kamala Harris tonight, who will officially accept her party's nomination for president. It's also her 10th wedding anniversary to her husband, the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff. There are some other big-name speakers we're going to be hearing from later this evening. They include former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger and North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper. Harris's sister, Maya, is also speaking, and tonight's theme of the convention is For Our Future. Let me bring in our national political reporter, Taylor Popolars. Taylor, Vice President Harris is reintroducing herself to the American people tonight. I know lots of people are watching our broadcast, but a lot more are going to be tuning in for the first time. What do we expect her to say tonight?
Yeah, Errol, we had a pretty in-depth conversation with one of her senior advisors. His name is Ian Sams, and he said tonight will be kind of a combination of things for Harris. She wants to reintroduce herself and talk about her upbringing. She wants to talk about her career as a prosecutor. One of the reasons North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper has the prime speaking slot right before her, he's a former attorney general who served alongside her when she was attorney general in California. Harris also wants to paint a contrast with both the Donald Trump campaigns and, in a different way, but still a meaningful way, a contrast with the Joe Biden campaign. You know, she wants to say, yes, I served as Biden's deputy, but here's what I want to do. Here's how I want to take things further, as her advisor Ian Sams put it to us. But expect a lot of biographical information from Harris. You know, she has been vice president for 3.5 years, but if you stop people on the street, they know her name, but they don't necessarily know much about her. And expect her to, again, talk about her prosecutorial background. There's been a lot of talk about how she is now the prosecutor versus the convicted felon as Donald Trump deals with his legal issues. I think that will often be on display. And as you alluded to in terms of the kind of warm-up speakers, you have every night there's been a former Republican or a current Republican who has disavowed the Trump part of the GOP and is speaking here at the Democratic Convention. That is also a theme. Ian Sams, that advisor, told us we'll also hear some policy from Harris talking about the economy, trying to lower the cost of living, potentially talking about the southern border. You know, we've seen a lot of her in the last couple of weeks in these big arena settings, but she hasn't sat down for an interview yet. She hasn't really released a detailed policy agenda. So tonight will kind of be the first glimpse of that in the weeks to come. The campaign also told us after tonight, before the month of August ends, she will sit down for an interview. I did pitch Spectrum News to be the host for that, so we'll see if that happens. But it's going to be a night completely centered around Harris. Full stop. Okay, really looking forward to that. Thank you, Taylor. Right now, speaking are members of the so-called Exonerated Five. The Central Park Five is a case from several decades ago that had an indirect connection to Donald Trump. One of the members is now a member of the city council in New York City. But these were 5 teenagers who were falsely accused, wrongfully imprisoned, later exonerated. Donald Trump, at the time was a businessman, had called for them to be executed.
These are my brothers. These are my brothers. Yes,
man
indeed.
Speaking is Yusef Salaam. He's a member of the New York City Council, was just elected last year.
I am Yusef Salaam. A New York City councilman representing my hometown of Harlem. That's right. Man. Representing my hometown of Harlem, USA. And listen, as my friend Corey Wise just said, 45 wanted us unalive. He wanted us dead. Today, we are exonerated because the actual perpetrator confessed, and DNA proved it. That guy says he still stands by the original guilty verdict. He dismisses the scientific evidence rather than admit he was wrong. He has never changed, and he never will. That man thinks that hate is the animating force in America. It is not.
Okay, Yusef Salaam, talking about a case from decades ago. Let's head down to the floor of the United Center. Our roving reporter, Cassie Semyon, is there with a member of Congress. Cassie, who are we speaking with now?
Yeah, Errol, I am joined by California Congressman Robert Garcia, a first-term congressman, a surrogate for the campaign. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a very personal relationship with Kamala Harris. Talk to me a little bit about what it means to you to be able to see her tonight accept the nomination of the party.
I mean, this is a very exciting moment, obviously. As you can see, right now the convention is electric. She's someone who knows people. She's always fighting for the people. Working in California, just for everyone to get to know the Kamala Harris that we know in California, I think is so important. She's smart, she's tough, she's kind, she's funny. And I can't wait to see her as president.
And you've talked a lot about the personal connection you have with her, the fact she called you after your mom had passed, that you had her swear you in as Long Beach mayor. I mean, that friendship, I mean, how excited for you, not as, you know, for the party and as a member of Congress, but as a friend, how excited are you for this moment?
Yeah, I'm super excited because I know that everyone here is going to get to know the Kamala that I know and so many know. I've been supporting her. I've known her for 15 years or so, and have always been political allies with her. It's an honor to help her with her campaign. I co-chaired her 2019 presidential campaign, and tonight she's going to prove to the country why she should be the president, and I can't wait to get her elected.
What are you hoping to hear from her speech tonight?
Look, I think what you're hearing right now, people are fired up. They're going to hear a vision for the future and a reminder that we're not going to go back to a time that was chaotic, that was hurtful. Donald Trump is a liar and a con man, and we got to get away from that.
I mean, what do you make of the fact that this was supposed to be Joe Biden's Democratic National Convention 4 weeks ago? Now it's Harris's. Do you think this energy would have been the same if President Biden was still at the top of the ticket?
Look, I love President Biden. I think he did the right thing for the country, and I support him to the last day. And I'm proud of what he's done to help the vice president and Kamala Harris. And so we're at a great spot, and we're moving forward. And Joe Biden made the case Monday night more than anyone else why we should support Kamala Harris.
All right, thank you so much, Congressman, for joining me. I'm going to send it back to you in the studio, Errol.
All right, thanks very much, Cassie. Let's talk with Josh Robin now. He is Spectrum News anchor and chief national political reporter. And Josh, we've been hearing from a lot of people in the Democratic Party over the last few days. But as the old saying goes, you can please all of the people some of the time and some of the people all of the time. But there are some people here tonight who feel slighted. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, I think the biggest group, Errol, are Palestinian Americans. They have asked for a Palestinian American representative to speak tonight, representing the uncommitted vote. Flashback, the genesis of this is, of course, the attacks by Hamas on Israel on October 7th and the subsequent Israeli war in the Gaza Strip. In the Michigan primary in particular, there were 13% of voters who voted none of the above. They didn't vote for Joe Biden, although he won that state handily, because of the concern of the Biden administration's handling of the war and support for Israel. Now, fast forward, those individuals are here. They have power as delegates, obviously not nearly enough to stop Kamala Harris from being the nominee, which she is, of course, but they wanted a speaking role over the last few days. We heard last night from the parents of an American Israeli who is held in the Gaza Gaza Strip as a hostage. Those parents did talk about the suffering of ordinary civilians, but Palestinian Americans want their chance as well. And I went and talked with some of them today. They said that they were basically put off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Tonight's Thursday. It's the big night for Kamala Harris. So the thought is that they will not be given any kind of speaking role. And they do have the support, the Palestinian American group of the United Auto Workers. It's a very powerful union which supports Kamala Harris, and also the Michigan Democratic Party. It's unclear how much of effect this will have in the general election, but there's still those tensions there, obviously, and it's something to keep an eye on, Errol.
Yeah, I would imagine that over and against what it is they want to do is sort of an overarching reality, which you and I are aware of. We should tell our viewers this, that every word of every speech, with the possible exception of maybe a president like Bill Clinton or Joe Biden or Barack Obama, has to be vetted and approved by the people who are running this convention, right?
Oh, absolutely. They want to make sure that there's nothing that steps on Kamala Harris's message. Let me also just say, and you and I think, talked about this a couple of nights ago, obviously Joe Biden is the president now, and there's some legitimate concerns from different standpoints, I should say, when it comes to this highly controversial, highly fraught war. The Republican platform does not make any mention of Palestine. The Democratic platform makes repeated mentions of Palestine. The hope, according to the Democratic platform, that it will be its own state, its own viable state, living in peace and security next to Israel. So the protests here, there have been definitely some protests and some arrests, but I didn't see anything near that in the Republican convention, where Donald Trump has, frankly, used the term Palestinian as a slur against individuals. So it's just something to note. We understand why the protests are here with the person in charge, but it just is somewhat noteworthy, I would think, that one party here has this position of believing in a two-state solution, talking about dignity for Palestinians, and the other party, objectively does not mention that in their platform.
Okay, yeah, well, very, very well worth noting. And of course, this is not a discussion or a debate. It is a convention with the aim of bringing people together. So we're not likely to hear any off notes from the podium tonight. Let's bring in our panel of Spectrum News political anchors. We've got Alex Cohen in El Segundo, California, Tim Boyum in Raleigh, North Carolina, Curtis Jackson in Columbus, Ohio, and Holly Gregory in St. Petersburg, Florida. So, Tim, let me start with you. It turns out that, as I guess we knew all along, the governor of your state, Roy Cooper of North Carolina, will be speaking just before Kamala Harris, a very high-profile spot at the convention. And apparently, Governor Cooper had that high-profile spot even before Kamala Harris was the nominee. What's going on there?
Yeah, my sources inside the governor's office say Kamala Harris wanted him in this spot specifically, which makes you wonder if he might have been the vice presidential nominee if he chose to be. There was a lot of speculation in the weeks leading up to when she made that choice, but I'm told that he took himself out of the process at the very beginning so she could pick somebody. There's a lot of questions about why that happened, but with this arrangement tonight, it really makes you wonder, and it also makes you wonder if he might become an attorney general candidate for her if she wins this race. They've known each other they overlapped for about 6 years when they were attorney general. The governor, before he was governor, he was elected in 2016, was attorney general for 16 years in North Carolina. And what's interesting about, I'm eager to hear in this speech tonight, is I've covered the governor for more than 20 years here in North Carolina. He's not known necessarily as a great speaker, like the Obamas. But I'm told at the delegation breakfast this morning, he had the crowd on their feet, and he's been kind of more loose about the way he's been speaking than I've ever seen him before, and with more energy than I've ever seen. We've been hearing him say for the last couple of weeks that it feels like 2008, which is the last time a Democrat won in North Carolina. And so it also kind of plays to the role that potentially the campaign believes that North Carolina can play and that they can win. I'm told tonight he's going to focus, though, on their time together as AG. He's going to portray her as a fighter, as a prosecutor who's tough against crime. And I think that's try to counter, what we've heard from the Trump campaign, and that they are trying to portray her as a weak person or a weak candidate out there. So I'm really eager to hear what he's going to say tonight.
Okay, we'll all be watching. And Alex, there's a large Latino population, of course, in Harris's home state of California, your home state as well. Talk a little bit about the role Latinos will play in determining who gets the White House.
An absolutely huge role. And what we've been hearing for quite some time from Latino strategists is that Democrats, quite frankly, have been taking them for granted. There is an opinion held by many that there's always this assumption that Latinos will vote for Democrats because there has been a long history of that. But Latino voters of today are markedly different in terms of their personal experience than Latinos of yesteryear. And what has stood out to me, California's delegation is right in the front row. We've seen both on stage and there in the convention hall so many African-American Californian political leaders. Right now, Black Californians only make up 5% of our state. Latinos make up 40%. So we just heard there Cassie talking to Robert Garcia, a young Peruvian American star of politics. And I think it's a really important moment for Kamala Harris's team to show that there are many alliances here. Blacks with Latinos, blacks with Jews, as we've seen earlier this week, blacks and Asians. We are seeing several Asian American elected leaders, folks like Ted Lieu speaking earlier this evening. They cannot leave any group behind, given just how close of a race this is shaping up to be.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that, Alex. And Holly, former President Donald Trump was at the Arizona border today talking about what some Republicans are calling migrant crime. Now, Republicans have been criticizing Democrats for not focusing enough on border issues. Do you expect Kamala Harris to talk about the border tonight?
She may mention it. We've heard very little at the DNC about it. And if she does bring it up, I think what you're going to hear, Errol, is she is going to say that it was Trump, in her view, who killed the bipartisan Senate agreement on the border so that he could have the issue as an election issue. And at his appearance today at the border in Arizona, he had a long news conference. He was surrounded by several people whose family members or themselves have been victims of crime from people who have come into the country illegally. And he was asked about that. He said, they asked him, why did you kill the Senate bill? Why did you tell Republicans not to vote for it? He said, that's simply not true. I gave my opinion on that bill. I thought it was a terrible bill. The vast majority of Republicans agreed with that. And I can tell you here in our state, our two Republican senators, Rubio and Scott, long before Trump weighed in on it, they said this is a terrible bill. All it does is quickly facilitate migration at the southern border. It doesn't stop it. Trump then went on to voice his support for legislation that actually did pass a chamber of Congress, and that was H.R. 2, which passed the House, but Chuck Schumer killed in the Senate. And H.R. 2 basically went back to all of the Trump policies that the Biden-Harris administration on day one overturned at the border, like ending catch and release and reinstating Remain in Mexico. So there's no doubt that Trump thinks that he has an advantage on the issue of the border, and it is something that voters across the board for many months have put in their top 2 or 3 issues. It's the economy and it's the border. So he is trying to really hammer that home. And at some point, when Harris does answer questions, it doesn't matter. I know she said she wasn't the border czar, that she was there to examine root causes from Central America, why people are coming across. But the question must be asked that when the Biden-Harris administration took office on day one, according to Border Patrol, migrant crossings were at a 45-year low. Within the first month, Biden had undone all the Trump policies and immigration went like this. And then it stayed at that level for years, long before there was ever a Senate bill. So she must answer, did she support those policies? And more importantly, what will she do going forward?
Okay, let me go to Curtis. A big issue for Democrats tonight, we've been told, is going to be gun violence. We expect to hear from former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who survived a shooting, as well as other gun violence survivors. And the Tennessee Three, some state lawmakers who were temporarily expelled from the Tennessee legislature after leading a protest against gun violence. What's the conversation going to be like? We did hear Governor Tim Walz last night talk about being a hunter and also supporting the Second Amendment. What's the conversation going to settle out as, do you think?
Well, I think it will probably start with them touting the legislation that did get passed, the bipartisan legislation that did get passed during the Biden administration in allowing for some more control over assault weapons. So it starts there, but then it goes to the unfinished work. that has not occurred yet. We don't have any sort of system set up for universal checks, for example, closing some loopholes that are out there, and in some ways doing more to get ghost guns, among other types of weapons, off the streets and improve public safety. This is where her role as prosecutor comes in. It's somewhat interesting here, right? Because on the one hand, she's a prosecutor. She goes after the criminals and does so in a dispassionate way and does so in a way that makes sure that they're held to full account. On the other hand, she's got to reach out to sectors of the community and different communities around the country that are dealing with this issue in a way that goes beyond rule of law or law and order. And so I think this is where it comes to a bit of a challenge for her to sort of balance out her role as a former prosecutor versus her role as someone in the executive who has worked across party lines to deal with this issue in a way that just goes beyond enforcing laws. So that's going to be a very interesting conversation. It's going to be a trick for her, I think, to be able to sort of pull off that in a way that makes sure that she hammers home her roots as a prosecutor when it comes to this issue, but also gives some level of compassion as to what her approach will be.
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Curtis. Let's go down to the floor and check back in with our roving reporter, Cassie Semien. Who are you speaking with now?
Well, I have the great honor of being joined by Senator Barbara Boxer. Barbara Boxer, you retired and Kamala Harris was elected to fill your seat. I mean, talk to me about what this means for you to see her tonight accept the nomination.
Well, it's an extraordinary moment. I have been to every convention except one since the 80s. I've never felt such excitement because of the history-making nature of this run, but also because our country's on the line. We have Donald Trump, who said he wants to be a dictator on day one, who wants to take over all our personal decisions, who thinks that climate change is a hoax. I could go on, and you have a more mainstream candidate in Kamala Harris who believes her job is to make life better for all of us. So it's history-making, but it's also crucial for all of us.
And when you and the late Senator Dianne Feinstein were elected, you were two women entering the Senate together. You know how hard it is as a woman to run these races to win. Talk a little bit about the challenges now that lie ahead for Kamala Harris in the next, 3 months.
Well, I think one of the things about our country is we don't realize what a struggle it has been for women to have equal rights. I'm talking about even the right to take out a loan, let alone anything else. But to get elected to these higher offices is very difficult. And Donald Trump has already tried to put her down, say that, she's as beautiful as his wife, as if she's his wife, He says these crazy things about her, that she's not smart, when she is very smart and very prepared for this.
All right.
So it's tough.
Thank you so much, Senator Boxer. I appreciate your time. I'm going, you're wearing white. Okay, so you're wearing white. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, the campaign put out a message for us to wear white. I packed it anyway. I didn't know that we were supposed to do it. This is an old Senate jacket I used to wear in the summer. So I was lucky, but most of the people got the memo, and white stands for suffragettes, the struggle for a woman's right to vote. You're way too young to remember any of it, and I am too, but when my mother was born, she did not have the right to vote. That didn't happen to women until 1920. It's been a very fierce struggle. So tonight, we're wearing white in honor of the suffragettes, in honor of Kamala, in the hopes that she will finally break this glass ceiling.
Senator Boxer, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to send it back to you in the studio, Errol.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. Suffragette white is the color. Now we'll know why. Let's go from the floor to the upstairs, where Taylor Popolars has some excerpts from what Vice President is scheduled to say tonight. What have you been able to learn, Taylor?
Yeah, Errol, we just got these from the campaign. 5 different topics that Harris is going to touch on in her remarks tonight. The first is talking about her upbringing and her own mother, who came to America from India when she was just 19 with a dream to become a scientist. And Harris is going to talk about how that paved the way for her own career path. Another point that the campaign says she'll talk about is when Harris learned in high school that her best friend at the time, named Wanda, was being sexually abused by her stepfather. And according to the excerpts we received, Harris says, quote, "That is one of the reasons I became a prosecutor, to protect people like Wanda." That's a story we've heard on the trail previously. Harris is also going to promise to be a president for all Americans, making a direct appeal to more independent and Republican voters. As we talked about earlier, there have been many Republicans featured at this convention who are frustrated with Donald Trump and are lending their support to Harris this election cycle. She's also going to talk about Donald Trump. One quote that we received says, "In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man, but the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious." We also know that she's going to talk about the middle class, saying that's where she comes from. It was her upbringing, and it's going to inform her view if she is to be elected president, to really talk about the middle class and to lean into that. So slight glimpses of the policy, but also the personal. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, Harris has been in the public eye for a long time, but she doesn't always lean into her personal details and kind of the more biographical aspects of her life. So it seems like she's going to be diving into that tonight, and I think that's something her supporters really want to hear and want the rest of the world to hear.
All right, thank you for that preview, Taylor. Now, our other reporter, Kevin Fry, is making headlines in New York after interviewing New York's governor, Kathy Hochul. Listen to what they were talking about yesterday.
It's kind of funny looking. I mean, I'm not sure what to make of this. Like, why is it so high? Like, I don't get it. I know it takes like an hour to make. Like, we get hungry. We're not waiting an hour. We want our pizza done in a New York minute.
Okay, let me bring in Kevin and another New Yorker, Josh Robin. This is a very important question to New Yorkers. Who's got the best pizza? They've got that deep dish thing going on in Chicago. You saw the governor didn't know quite what to make of it. Kevin, by the way, which do you prefer?
Don't do that to me, Errol. I will say for Kathy Hochul, it would probably be political suicide for her to, shall we say, have taken part in eating any of that. And so she very dutifully decided to, shall we say, refuse multiple times my suggestion that maybe she try a bite. Would you like to sample some of this? She was not having it. She also noted that she used to work when she was growing up in a pizza shop. And so she argues she knows pizza, and this in Chicago ain't pizza.
That ain't pizza. What do you think, Josh? Have you tried any of that stuff out there?
I tried the deep dish, Errol. The problem with deep dish pizza, Errol, is I'm a purist as a New Yorker, and I don't think that you should eat pizza with a knife and a fork. And I don't know how you eat deep dish pizza with anything other than a knife and a fork. I prefer ones that you can fold and you can eat while walking.
Yeah, you know, the former mayor of New York was caught on camera using a knife and fork. It went on for days. It went on